Today, this is about where we're going to end up with the completed frame of the Rocinante's Galley. It's going to be framed in extruded aluminum, and these are the plans I drew up of the frame in Shaper 3D. Couple things to note. One, it's taller than the bed. That was a mistake. It makes sense to make your galley taller than your bed if the ship you're building is not framed by a Sprinter 2500 frame, but this would just make it so that there'd just be too little space between the kitchen counter and sink counter and the cabinets above it. So after I got all my aluminum and started putting it together, I went ahead and sized this to be the exact size of the bed. Additionally, there is like a 1-inch overstep, kind of like you have in traditional kitchens. So we got that, and then we have framing for 3 drawers, and those are sized to match this sink shape, which I've updated a couple times. And then there'll be a door that's made out of, well, all the wood for the door and the cabinetry will be Baltic birch, and the top will be a butcher block style surface, and we'll have a conductive or a induction stove up there. Okay, so this is the aluminum we got from T-Nuts, and it's the cheapest place to find Series 10 extrusion in the United States. If you know of a cheaper place, please let us know in the comments below. So I ordered some stuff to spec, and then other stuff I just bought in like 5-foot bar stock so that I could cut it down to the size I need, knowing that I was still going to need a lot of aluminum for the other cabinets, which I haven't drawn up yet, and it just save on shipping to buy the bar stock at that length. The other thing to note is if you try and buy anything at longer than about 5 feet, your shipping cost turns to freight shipping costs, and it can get more expensive than the material if you're not buying a lot of material. Okay, other surprise, the water box extends into the framing space, which I knew that would happen, but for this back part of the frame, it causes it to overextend a bit. So just looking at our plans as we go along, we're just going to adjust those as needed and cut off a piece of that back part of the frame so that we don't have to slide it behind the water box. I was thinking about doing that, which is why there's a plastic wedge there, but instead I decided, hey, that water box can stay flush against that wall. It's good enough, and we'll just cut that piece down. So we measured that, and then I started putting my 1-inch risers on, because you have one base frame and then you're going to have 1-inch risers, and all this is going to get bolted together with a bunch of bolts and T-nut fasteners. So I went ahead and got a handful of fasteners and Loctited all of them in one batch and just started putting things together that I could put together before I started cutting the frame down. That's an important part of learning to work with extruded aluminum. Everything goes together like a Lego set or an erector set, but if you don't have drawn out plans with every single part and every single step, you're going to be fabricating as you go along, and your visualization of where your T-nuts are going to slot into the T-slot, it'll be very important to kind of get that right as best you can. So that's what I'm doing here. Trying to visualize. I do have a lot of it, I'd say it's like 90% drawn out, and the scale of the drawing just, had to be taken down a little bit to match the height of the bed, which is 35 inches US. You can convert that to metric if you want, if you're on that system, which is great. And I will say, when you're cutting bar stock, use a metric tape measure and measure to the millimeter. Your cuts will be much more accurate. So if you have the US size measurement on one side, that's great, and then you can use the millimeter measurement on the other side and just get much more accurate cuts and take advantage of the base 10 metric system. Okay, now we're drilling more holes in the side of the van to get our riv nuts in. And then we're buying some new drill bits on Amazon because the drill bit we're using for our 5M riv nuts dull from all the holes we've already drilled in the van. Now we're painting those holes so that we have no exposed metal, and then we can get our riv nuts in. So this is the riv nut gun I have, and it's working good so far, but I figured out in that left hole I drilled that the gun wasn't going to work because I couldn't spread the arms out long enough without hitting the water tank. See, just doesn't fit. So I wish I had one that was better than that. I had to drill another hole, and that's just what I had to do. And so it made me more mindful of the limitations of this riv nut tool I have. Had I had it to do over, if I had a bigger air tank, I probably would have gotten one that runs on air. I'm hoping to get through the build on this one, and we'll see how it goes. We're well on our way though. Okay, so we got that riv nut in. The base of this frame then will be able to attach to the wall of the van with 2 M5 riv nuts, and we'll just continue adding bolts and riv nuts as we build up to keep this thing really secure. Now these walls aren't straight, so we use some spacers that we fabricate out of shims, plastic shims, to get a straight line. All right, now we're on to the second layer, which has our, I'll just call it an overstep. I don't know what the proper name is for that on these types of ships, but we're getting that overstep in, and that way your toe can like rest under there a little bit better. So this is how I designed it, and I think it's going to be a good design for what we're doing, and I hope to get like an LED light under the long piece of T-slot we got there. This is a type of fastener I thought would work in this application, but then I realized after putting Loctite on all those little screws that it wasn't going to work because I needed it flush. This is better for a different type of application. So after I put these 2 screws in and put my T-slot on there, I realized it wasn't going to work. Took them out, and we will try again with a different type of fastener. Which meant I had to take that fastener off, move it onto the other side. And this is it. This is the joys of fabricating your own galley without perfectly drawn up plans. Fortunately, extrusion's forgiving. You can make a mistake like that and adjust without having to make dramatic changes to your entire design. Okay, so on this side, we got this type of fastener and a quarter bracket. And now we're getting our 1-inch riser on this side. So actually the only spot we don't have a 1-inch riser is that back left-hand corner. So the other ones each have 1-inch risers that the extrusion's getting built on, which I am okay with. And I'm okay with that because we're going to have plenty of rib nuts on this back assembly, holding it to the wall, like bolting it to the wall of the ship. All right, now it's time to get some more rib nuts in. So the back framing, we're going to have some vertical bars. This is our first one, and this is where we're going off our plans a bit to match what we have in the physical realm, which is the water tank. So this is set up so it's going to hold that water tank in place and keep it from moving forward. So that's good. And this one is going to be important for it to have its own rib nut. So we're giving it its own rib nut, and we're going to find out later that we should have put a shim there. Putting another rib nut in the base on this pillar, and I'm going for spots with 1 that I can use the rib nut tool, and 2 that have thicker pieces of sheet metal that are going to work for me. Okay, so we got that done, and now it's time to prep more pieces. So we're working on our other upright stands, going with our routine of pre-blue Loctiting all our bolts we're going to need, and then getting as many of our fasteners slid into place ahead of time as we can, just to be as efficient as possible, but also hopefully not make any mistakes. I have my headphones on because I'm using the chop saw, crosscut saw, to trim the framing pieces to size as I go along. So we get this corner in with 2 corner brackets. These corner brackets are like $4 each. And it's hard to know when it's your first ship build if you really need 2. And I'm just, for this particular part of the build, I'm erring on the side of caution and using more so that it has really good framing support. So with 3 of our structural legs in, close to 3, we have 2. We're moving to the back 2. We'll have a rib nut there, pre-drilling our hole for our rib nut. Another thing to think about when you're drilling these holes is where are your cabinets going to go and where are the drawer sliders for your cabinets? Because if you put a rib nut in and a bolt through that rib nut, you may not be able to put a drawer slide crossbar in there because it might hit the bolt. If you can't visualize that now, don't worry, stick around. We'll run into a problem like that in the future and have to troubleshoot it. Okay, so we got pillar number 4 in, got our rib nut in, got our bolt in, just securing everything, checking our measurements on everything using the centimeter millimeter system. This is going to allow us to cut our next few segments because all these vertical bars have to be custom sized so that when they're completed, they're the height of the bed. But at the frame level, we have to account for the height of the birch plywood that's going to be on the bed frame, taking that up to its size, and then this will have an 1.5 inch butcher block on top, taking it up to that equal size. So that's what we're doing here, and I'm focused on my construction. I didn't redraw this in Shaper 3D. We just had the drawing that you saw at the beginning of this film to work off of. At this point, we've mapped out the lengths of our drawers where we think the sliders are going to go by just measuring each one of our vertical bars. And it's time to install this middle bar that's going to hold one side of the drawer sliders for our unit. We got a rib nut in there. So that's another bolt that's holding this whole assembly to the wall of the ship. Now we're getting to the top of our frame. So we get the top of our frame in, and then we can work on the framing for the drawer sliders. With the back center pillar in place, we can move to the front center pillar, and we are doing angled brackets on either side and dropping in T-nuts for our drawer sliders. And at this point, it's a lot of measurement and check because we want to make sure these pillars are the exact same distance from each other on both the front and back of our assembly. So we check and then we just tap it into place over and over again until they're both right where we want them to be. Now that we're on the top level, we realize we should have used spacers on our upper bolts for our rib nuts because the curvature of the band is put these back supports in 3 different locations. So none of them are square and none of them are plumb. So now we need to square and plumb all these by redoing that work. So first things first, we want to get our bar stock in there in a test fit way so that we can establish what's going to be square and plumb. Once that's done, we can retension and add spacers as needed to our rib nuts. And well, the bolts that are in our rib nuts. All along the way, we're using Loctite blue thread fastener so that when this van travels on the continuous earthquake, which is the road system in the United States, these fasteners stay in place. They stay secure. All right, so we've got our fasteners in and we've got the back part of our frame in. We want to get the rest of the top of our frame in. Before we do that though, it would behoove us to get the drawer sliders in, or the framing that the drawer sliders are going to attach to. That way we don't have to insert them while the top part of the assembly is in place. If we did it that way, we would have to, fish T-nuts into their bolt holes, and it would just be harder. So this is the easier way. And it's about this time that we start to realize our drawer height, well, it's just going to be different. What I did was I went into the house and I found the appliances I knew I wanted in the van, the Instapot, the Vitamix blender, and I looked at how big those were, and I set the big drawer height so that when the drawers made, those appliances would fit in that drawer. So with my big drawer dimensions roughed in place, I could go to my two smaller drawers, which will have other stuff in them that's important, but not what I would call a luxury item like the Vitamix and Instapot. So now we are getting the rails for our drawer sliders on our other side. And this is the one that's going to be for the big drawer. A lot of measuring on all four sides. Measuring, sliding, measuring, sliding. And it's tough if you've never done this before, because you get one drawer done and then you go to the next ones and you just want them all the same. So we've done that on one side. We're going to our other side. And this is about the time we realize that this drawer is not going to fit because there's bolts in the way into our rib nuts. So we need to adjust the drawer height of our drawer sliders for our second drawer. To do that, we put a level on the side of the ship that paints a laser in a line. That way we can adjust the location of our T-nuts so that they're not impacted by these existing bolts. Otherwise we'd have to put in new rib nuts, which would not be fun. So that's what we're doing here. And along the way, we're deciding this rib nut, it's got to go. Otherwise, our drawer sizes are just going to be all messed up. And it is at that point that I decide that this ship's galley has enough bolts going into the walls of the van that it's going to be fine with one less bolt going into one less rib nut. It's going to be plenty secure. So you win some, you lose some. And the one we're going to win is in the location of this new rib nut we're going to put in this location on the top. So taking out the one in that lower segment, we've drilled through here and realized, oh, there's another sheet of metal behind there we have to get through too. Put some paint on that, get our rib nut in, move our bolt over, basically reassemble a lot of this. Again, benefits of extruded aluminum. If you were to weld all this in place, you'd have to cut all those welds and start over, right? Re-weld everything. So now we're using our laser to keep everything square and level from the beginning. And we have our bolt for our rib nut in, but it is not tight and secure yet. We want to get these drawer frames in. So again, just measuring, tightening, using our millimeter scale, get everything perfectly square. One of our passengers got a little sick, so he's just resting in the cargo bay on a piece of foam that came in the solar panel kit while I continue building our starship. So with that out of the way, we are ready to finish the top level of our frame. To do this, we have our lengthwise bar. It's our last one. And what we're really, we're really on the 90-yard line here, closing in to the touchdown end zone. So just tightening everything up as we go along, feeling it, making sure we don't have any fasteners we've accidentally left loose as we've revised this assembly to get it all working the way we want it to be working. And then we start putting our fasteners in for this side. So we know we're going to have a drawer slider for our top drawer. And this is probably going to be like the silverware drawer. I'm not 100% sure how it's going to work out, but stick around and we'll figure it out together. Okay, everything's done except for the bar on the back and a little bit of bar on the side, but I'm out of fasteners, so I'm going to have to order the ones that I think we need, figure out they're actually more expensive than the ones we need, and I got the wrong ones, and then order another batch of fasteners that match the ones we need. So always double check you're getting the right fasteners. Returning them is not, I don't know how hard it is. I've actually never done it. It may be, if you've had good experiences returning fasteners you shouldn't have bought to T-Nuts, let us know in the comments below. So with that last piece of the Galley extrusion in place, we're going ahead and double checking that everything's tightened, all our rib nuts are tightened, everything's good to go. And a few days later, the fasteners we purchased show up and we can finish framing everything. With 2 more pieces left in our frame build, these are going to go in lickety split. This one was a doozy. I thought it was going to take about a day. Took a couple weekends, maybe 3 days. And that's okay. I keep telling myself that building this starship is going to take a couple years. If I build 50 days a year, that's 100 days. And you can do a lot of building in 100 days. So I'm putting fasteners on this part of the framing, connecting it to the bed framing so that they become a single frame. And I've done that with parts of the framing below this. Now we're just tucking our electrical wires behind our frame and getting our last piece of bar stock in. In any case, that's all I got for you today. Thanks for watching. We'll see you around.